Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel for a big round of balance that maybe will be coming in OB3, maybe it'll be a hotfix. I'm not entirely sure when this is going live. They basically just revealed this on Titan Talk. There's no official notes or anything, I don't think, so we're just going to be going through them on the Titan Talk document that they've got. They didn't really give any kind of ETA on like when this is officially going to be going out. It might be an OB3 or it might be sooner than that as a hotfix. I'm not entirely sure. But this is one of the biggest balance patches we've seen, honestly. There's some really impactful changes here. Some big god changes, big item changes, an absolute ton of stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right in. So first up, Gilded Arrow and Sharpshooter's Arrow are going to be nerfed, which absolutely makes sense. This was probably the best item in the game. In fact, it was definitely the best item in the game when it released. They have already nerfed it a tiny bit in a hotfix, but it wasn't really anything. It was still way too strong. And so what they're doing now is they're giving it a shift. Probably overall, I would say this is a nerf to the item. It is called a shift because they're buffing it in some ways, nerfing it in other ways, but I would say it's nerfed more than it's buffed. So the base form, the Gilded Arrow, they have decreased the basic attack power by 5, added 10% attack speed, decreased the passive gold bonus from 4 to 3, increased the mark cooldown from 8 to 10 seconds, and also decreased the passive attack speed from 25 to 15. So the attack speed remains the same if you were getting consistent mark kills in lane, which you would do a lot of the time. But instead, you're just going to have 10% of that always at all times, but they've taken 10% off of the passive as well. And then the mark cooldown and gold bonus increase is going to be significantly reducing the amount of gold that you're generating with this item, which is really impactful for ADCs. And then they also took 5 basic attack power off of it. And I think this is fine. It is mostly a shift. They haven't really nerfed this one too much other than mainly the gold generation, which I think was the main issue with the base form of this. Honestly, the base form wasn't that broken. It was probably still better than the other ADC starters, but it was mainly the upgraded form, the Sharpshooter's Arrow, that was completely breaking the game. And so for that, they have taken 10 basic attack power off of it, increased the attack speed by 5%. The increased basic attack damage now only applies when hitting gods, which is a really big one. You could just stand far away from Fire Giant and just be dealing 20% more shred on Fire Giant as the ADC, which is absolutely massive. I have even worked on Phoenixes and Titans and stuff like that as well, I think. So yeah, this is really good. Decrease the basic attack damage bonus as well, just flat from 15% to 10%. And then also the passive gold gains from kills and assists are increased by 5% instead of gold from all sources. And I believe basically what this means is you're not going to get increased gold from stuff like tower bounties, Fire Giant takes, Gold Fury takes, that kind of stuff. And then yeah, basic attack damage is increased by 10%. That's the change that they've made here. So yeah, overall some pretty good nerfs to this item, I think. I think it's still going to be strong, but it might not be, you know, just straight up the best item in the game anymore. They've also done some buffs to the other ADC starters, which we'll get to in a second, that might help make them more competitive with this item. And so jumping into those, Leather Cowl, they have removed the attack speed but added 5% lifesteal and increased the passive attack speed both from 10% to 15%. And Hunter's Cowl, they've given it 10 more strength, removed the attack speed like they did here, added 5% lifesteal like they did here, but they've also added a 10% lifesteal aura and also increased the attack speed aura as well. You know, this item had lifesteal in Smite 1. I think people were missing the fact that it had lifesteal in Smite 2, but they've taken a little bit of the attack speed off it. You're still going to be getting mostly the same attack speed, it's just a little bit less, because you're still getting it from the aura, and obviously the aura applies to yourself, but there's also a 10% lifesteal aura on it now, which is kind of interesting. You know, maybe go with double Hunter comps, or just, I guess, giving you a major bit of lifesteal. And actually, I lied, they were only buffing up Leather Cowl. Death Toll has been untouched in these update notes, I believe. Moving on, though, we have a bunch of mid-lane intelligence-based changes. So Conduit Gem and Sands of Time both get 5 more int. Soul Reaver gets a 200 gold cost reduction, which is kind of interesting. Soul Reaver is bad. It definitely does need a buff, but honestly, cost reduction probably isn't what I would have gone for. I think just buffing up the effect, making it more powerful, because I think it is, you know, it should be a luxury item. You don't want Soul Reaver to be super cheap. 2800 gold isn't super cheap by any means, but instead of a cost reduction, I probably would have just gone with buffing up the effect. Spirit of Desolation, they have added 10 cooldown rate to it, which is pretty cool. You know, Spirit of Desolation felt so weird in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1. Like in Smite 1, it had cooldown and flat pen, and it didn't have either of those stats in Smite 2. And adding 10 cooldown rate to it, you know, it's going to be better in those high cooldown rate builds because the passive is flat reduction. Staff of Mirrodin, they have also decreased the active cooldown from 150 to 120 seconds, so you can have this up every 2 minutes now, which I think is good. I think this item does have a lot of potential, but it really doesn't get built very much. It's one of the least built items in the game, but I think on some gods it can be really powerful, and you know, just keep lowering the cooldown until people start building it, in my opinion, and then if it becomes overpowered at like 90, if they go to 90 with it, you can just nerf it from that point. Next up is some tank / solo lane buffs, which are interesting. In my opinion. So Glorious Pridwin, they have increased the physical protection and magical protection by 10 and also the shield by 20%. So it's now 100% of your protections instead of 80, which is okay, I guess. Glorious Pridwin, I think, was a fine item. I'd say it was a pretty balanced item. I think that there was reasons to build it, but it wasn't like one of the best items in the game or anything. I guess it's fine to buff it. It's probably going to be pretty strong now, in my opinion. I think it was already a decent-ish item. Mystical Mail, again, another item that I think is pretty decent, but not anything super insane. They've just decreased the cost by 150, so that's probably fine. I think That's probably fine for mystical mail. These two are interesting though. Voidstone, they have increased the int by 5, the magical prot by 5, and the health by 100. And Void Shield, they have increased the strength by 10, the prot by 5, and the max health by 100. Voidstone, I guess I would be more okay with buffing, and I assume they just wanted to kind of buff these two in tandem because they're just mirrors of each other. Like, Voidstone doesn't see that much use, honestly, but Void Shield sees a ton of use. Void Shield is already a really good item, and they have absolutely omega buffed it here. 10 more strength, 100 more health, and 5 more prots to an item that was already getting built a lot in jungle and solo lane. I just don't think this was necessary, man. Void Shield's going to be one of the best items in the game now. Like, compare this to Titan's Bane. I feel like there's no reason to build Titan's Bane anymore. You get 5% less pen, but it's also a shred effect, so it also benefits your other allies, and you get so much better stats. I think Titan's Bane has like 40 strength on it, so you get like 10 less strength, but you get 50 physical prot, 200 health, and 5% less shred. Like that, I don't think there's any reason ever to build Titan's Bane anymore. You just build Void Shield. The item was already good. I don't really see why they're buffing it, to be honest. Void Stone, I guess, could have used the buffs because it doesn't really get used, and as I said, I guess they want to keep these items like, you know, they want to buff both because they're mirrors of each other, but they are fundamentally different items in terms of who builds them. And Void Shield definitely did not need a buff. Void Shield's going to be one of the best items of the game now, I think. And finally, Shield Splitter, they have just decreased the cost by 150, which is fine, I think. Shield Splitter doesn't really see too much play. Moving into God Balance, though. First up, we have Aladdin, who is getting some absolute omega nerfs in this patch, which is really good to see. So first up, Genie's Lamp, they have decreased these stats per level from 0.75 to 0.5, which goes from 17 down to 12 in terms of level 20. And this is good. This is definitely something that needs nerfs, but honestly, I don't even see why this needs to be a thing in the first place. Aladdin already has so much in his kit. I don't think he needs an extra even 12% stats compared to everyone else throughout the early and mid game. Like, this could just be removed, in my opinion, or take it down to like, you know, 5% or something like that. Like, this god already has so much stuff. He doesn't also need to be doing 12% more damage and have 12% more CDR and 12% more pen and all that kind of stuff. Next up, the 2 is getting some pretty substantial nerfs. So they have decreased the punch base damage by 4 up to 12 depending on rank. They have also taken 10% strength scaling and 10% int scaling off of it. And because this thing hits 5 times, that is an absolutely massive nerf to the ability. You know, that's going to be taking off, it's 12 per hit, so that's going to be taking off 60 base damage and then also 50% int scaling and 50% strength scaling from this ability. That's an absolutely massive nerf. Justified, this ability had no reason hitting as hard as it did. It hits as hard as like entire God's base kits just on its own. So definitely justified, but that is an absolutely massive nerf because you got to multiply all these nerfs by 5. They've also decreased the low health bonus damage on the dash part of the ability from 0.75 to 0.5. It was originally listed as 1%, but it was 0.75 always, but now it's down to 0.5. And then they have also increased the cooldown from 16 down to 12. It's now 16 down to 14, which I think is good as well. Agile Run, they have decreased the base damage from 60 to 220. It's now 60 to 200. And also the Genie damage from 30 to 110 plus 50% at 25% to 20 to 80 plus 30% 15%. So yeah, some pretty big nerfs to the overall jump in damage from Agile Run, especially if you're enhancing it with the Genie form. And then into the lamp, they have decreased the self-healing from 60 up to 80. It's now 60 at all ranks, which is a really big change. And increased the cooldown from 110 down to 90. It's 110 down to 100. This should never have been on 90 seconds, ever. They must have known that, but they just wanted to release him overpowered. I get it, but like, this never should have been on 90 seconds. 100 might even be too short for this kind of an ability, in my opinion. This is a sort of thing that maybe should be even on like 120 seconds. And then, of course, resetting yourself to 60% instead of 80% when they're at like 40 or whatever is actually like a really big deal. So yeah, overall, some really big Aladdin nerfs. Will it be enough? Maybe. These are some of the most heavy-handed nerfs we've seen for a new god in a long time. These are absolutely massive, but the god is kind of just fundamentally busted, so it is possible he needs more after this. But yeah, those are some absolutely massive nerfs, and 100% justified. The god's clearly broken. He has an insane win rate in all levels of play. It's just ridiculous. Moving on, though, we have a Zeus shift. Overcharge, they have decreased the damage increase from 20% to 15% per stack on his basic attacks. Chain Lightning, they have decreased the cooldown by 1 second. Interesting. Thunderclap, they have decreased the attack speed from 25 to 35. It's now 20 to 30. Detonate, they have decreased the base damage by 10 at all ranks and by but they've increased the scaling by 5%. And then Lightning Storm, they have increased the scaling by 10% as well. This is interesting, man. Maybe we should listen to their thoughts on this because I don't really see where they're going with these changes. It looks like they're trying to take down ADC Zeus and buff up int-based mid Zeus, but int-based mid Zeus is already better in my opinion.
When we look at our data and we listen to our players like playing Zeus in the range carry role and having quite a lot of success, but when they play it in mid, for example, they're having much less success. So I think we're going to see this quite often going forward in our balance, where we do a shift to try to buff the god in one role and nerf it in the other, just because we have such
interesting. Yeah, I guess it is just most people on their data is pointing to the fact that in-base mid Zeus is bad and ADC Zeus is good. He's definitely found success in both roles, but I think in-base mid Zeus is better. Maybe I'm just trolling, dude. Maybe the data and top players completely disagree with me on that, but I think in-base mid Zeus is honestly kind of nuts, and it will be even better after these changes. Like just 1-3ing into the back line, like it's just so nuts, man. I don't know. I'm interested how these changes will shake out. Moving on though, Medusa getting a few small nerfs. So Acid Spray, they have decreased the damage by 10 at all ranks, 10% strength scaling and 5% int scaling, so just a little bit off of that. I think the one's mainly the problem, but this will definitely hurt like wave clear and stuff like that, as she is a pretty high pressure early game ADC compared to a lot of other ones. And then Petrify, the cooldown goes from 100 to 110. I mean, it's a strong ult, but 110 kind of feels bad for this kind of an ability that can be countered by just turning or jumping. I don't know, I'm kind of fine with this. I think Medusa's a little bit overrated in general, and if I was going to hit anything from her, I would hit the 1 probably. But yeah, I do think she did need some nerfs. I think she's overrated, but I still think she's very strong and probably the number 3 ADC in the game. Jingwei also getting some stuff, who is probably the number 2/number 1 ADC in the game, probably number 1 in my opinion. So Persistent Gust, they have decreased the damage per tick by 5 up to 25 based on rank. This is a good change. This is a smart change. Obviously, you rank this ability first, and it was just clearing way too effectively. Like, you just put it down, and the archers just like kind of evaporated from all the tick damage. So this is really good that they're nerfing that, especially towards the top end. You know, as you get this ability maxed out, it's not just like one-shotting the archers or your back camps or anything else that you're trying to clear with it. They've also increased the cooldown by 1 second, which is good. Explosive bolts, they've increased the cooldown by 1 second as well, and decreased the additional scaling. From 103 to 115, it's now 102 to 110. So ultimately, I think the 2 is going to need more changes than this. You know, maybe make it like splash damage instead of AoE, or like take off some of the crit chance or something. I feel like Jingwei's 2 is just going to be perma-busted unless they make more substantial changes than just a couple of number tweaks like this. But they did also nerf the Sharpshooter's arrow, which was a lot of the reason why Jingwei was like the best ADC in the game. She was always really good, but a lot of the reason why she became like so oppressive was that starter item, and that's also been nerfed. Amaterasu getting some buffs. They have increased her base attack speed a little. Divine Presence, they have increased the attack speed buff. Instead of 10 up to 18, it's now 10 up to 30, which is pretty impactful. And Heavenly Reflection, they've increased the damage reduction scaling from 5% in to 7% in, which is interesting. Maybe bring back a little bit more of the in Amaterasu builds that we saw kind of in the early days. And I think this is fine. Amaterasu definitely fell off pretty hard in favor of like some other solo laners that released or just got buffed up or use items better or whatever. Armor's definitely not one of the top solo laners anymore. And her getting some buffs as well, which I think is fine. He's one of the more underperforming ADCs, though a lot of ADCs really don't compare to the top 3 of Medusa, Jing, and Ula right now. They're just kind of like a league above the rest of the ADCs. Impale, they have increased the damage by 20 in the early ranks, but nothing towards the later ranks, and also 5% strength. Desert Fury, they have increased the final damage by 15 up to 35, depending on rank, and 15% strength scaling as well. And Aspect of Pride, they have decreased the max attack speed from 100% to 60%. Impale and Desert Fury can now crit and proc basic attack item effects. Okay, this is cool, though. This is cool. That's not even a balance change. That's a straight up shift. Now, that's funny as fuck, honestly. I like that. I like that. I might try out Anhur after they launch these changes. Being a crit with Impale and Desert Fury is going to be kind of funny. Maybe like a Jingwei style build with like crit and Hydras, and you just absolutely obliterate people. I wonder if that would work with Hydras as well. Like if you press your 1 and then press your 2 to impale them into the pillar, is the 2 going to proc Hydras? That's interesting. Yeah, this is funny though. I like this. That's some cool Anhur changes. Cabrakan getting some buffs as well. This god has been drastically underperforming after his release. In tradition with Smite, Cabrakan released awful in Smite 1, one of the top 3 most underpowered releases ever. He's done the same thing in Smite 2. Terrible win rates across the board. No one's playing him really, just because he's so bad. Seismic Crush, they have increased the damage scaling from 60-40 to 75-45, so 15% more strength, 5% more in. They've also decreased the cooldown from 14 flat. It's now 14 down to 12, which is pretty impactful. Refraction Shield, they have increased the scaling by 5% in, the enhanced damage scaling by 5% strength, and also the protections by 2 at all ranks. Tremors, they have increased the damage scaling by 5% on the int, and the refire also 5% on the strength. And then Tectonic Shift, they have increased the damage scaling from 80-60 to 95-65. So yeah, basically a small cooldown reduction, a little bit more protections, and then just more damage on everything, basically. Only scaling. They've not really touched any of the base damages here, only scaling. So if you're going for a little bit more like Bruiser, Cabrakan builds on full damage, this is going to help that a lot. But like Cabrakan support probably doesn't benefit all too much here other than this cooldown reduction and the protections. And finally, for this patch, we have a Vulcan shift, which is another one that's kind of like blows my mind, to be honest. So Thermal Mod, they have increased the damage from 20 plus 10% in. It's now 30 plus 20%. This is already the best set 2 mod in the game. I don't know why they're buffing it. It's already better than everything else. Like, this is already what you went on mid lane in base Vulcan. I guess on tank Vulcan, you don't go this, obviously, but on mid-based in Vulcan, which is the best way to play him, in my opinion, this was already what you went, and they've just given him straight up more base damage and more scaling. Interesting that they buffed the best mod, in my opinion, but maybe I guess they have data that it's not the best mod and people aren't using it. I have no idea, dude. This kind of blows my mind. Masterwork mod, they have decreased the protections from 10 to 50. It's now 10 to 30. This is a sensible change, though. 50 flat protections, even just to Vulcan himself will be nuts, but it also applies to his whole team that are within range of the Thumper. Absolutely the best set 3 mod. Good to see that nerfed. Earthshaker, they've increased the damage scaling from 110 to 120 in, which again, I don't really understand why. This ability already hits so hard. It gets a 1.5 times damage multiplier at max range. So it's literally got 180% in scaling. If you can get up to like, you know, 700, 800 in the late game, literally that's just going to one-shot, which will be funny, I guess. But yeah, it seems like they've identified like support turret Vulcan is performing better than in mid-base Vulcan, which is not my experience whatsoever. But I guess if the data shows that, then maybe that's true. It's kind of interesting. An aspect of fortification, they've decreased the protections per level from 2 to 1.5. Again, probably a smart change. You get a lot of protections from this. But yeah, that is the notes that are probably going to be going live. I don't know, maybe in a hotfix or maybe in OB3. They just kind of showcase them on the Titan Talk. I think overall it's a good patch. I think there's a lot of good changes here. The Aladdin nerfs are really good. The Hunter starter item nerfs are good. But there's also some kind of questionable things here, in my opinion, like some of these Vulcan changes, buffing Void Shield for seemingly absolutely no reason. The Zeus changes are kind of questionable to me as well. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Maybe even based on feedback, they might change a couple of these things before the patch goes live. We'll see. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed my coverage of this. Let me know what you think about this patch down below. I think it's overall pretty good, and I will catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.